Imagine a letter sealed almost 4,000 years ago. Nobody has ever read it, not because it was lost, but because opening it would destroy it. And then one day scientists read every single word inside, without ever breaking the seal. And the strangest part isn't even the letter itself. It's what they found hiding in the clay around it, a tiny secret nobody was looking for. Stick with me, because this one has a twist near the end that I did not see coming. Let me take you back. Picture a dusty hill in the middle of Turkey. Today people call it Kultepe, but almost 4,000 years ago, it had another name, Kanesh. And back then, it was booming. This was a trading town, a real hub, full of merchants coming and going all day long. They came from a faraway city called Assur, hauling tin and fine cloth across the land on the backs of donkeys. And they came home loaded with silver, copper, and gold. That home city, Assur, sat far to the south, in the land we'd now call Iraq. Getting from there to Kanesh meant crossing a whole world of rivers, plains, and mountains. And this was not a quick trip to the corner store. A single caravan crossed rivers and mountains, stopping at town after town for weeks before it ever reached Kanesh. Traders coming from every direction would cross paths along the way, swapping news, goods, and gossip. Think of it like a shipping hub of the Bronze Age. Deals, profits, arguments about money, all of it. And like any business, these merchants kept records, piles and piles of them. Contracts, receipts, loans, complaints, letters to the family back home. One archaeologist put it perfectly. He said everything you'd find in a modern accounting office was already sitting in these ancient merchant files. But here's the thing. They didn't write on paper. They pressed tiny wedge-shaped marks into little tablets of wet clay. Now watch this. This part is clever. When a letter really mattered, they wrapped the clay tablet inside a second layer of clay. An envelope, basically. Then they stamped it with seals, so anyone receiving it could tell it hadn't been opened or messed with. It's the ancient version of a tamper-proof package. Every seal was pressed from a little carved stone, rolled across the wet clay like a personal signature. If the envelope was intact, you knew the deal inside was legit. And then the clay dried, and it got hard. I mean really hard, almost like stone. So, to read the letter sealed inside, you had to crack the envelope open and break it. There was simply no other way in. Archaeologists have been digging up this town for generations, and they've pulled out more than 20,000 of these clay tablets. Let that sink in. It's the largest private business archive from the entire ancient world. Not kings, not temples, just regular people's paperwork, frozen in the mud. It's so precious that it now sits on a United Nations list of the world's most important records. And there's a wild reason so many of them survived. A long time ago, a fire tore through part of the town. You'd think fire would ruin everything, but the raw clay tablets were soft and fragile. The heat accidentally baked them hard, like pottery in a kiln. That disaster is exactly why we can hold them today. Now, most of those tablets were already broken open or found loose in the dirt. Their words could be read, but some letters were still sealed, still locked inside their clay envelopes, silent for 4,000 years. So, here's the question that drove everyone a little crazy. What if you could read what's inside without smashing the shell that protected it for 40 centuries? For the longest time, that was just impossible. You either broke it open or you never found out. But before I show you how they solved that, let me take you inside the world hiding in these letters, because these merchants were not so different from us. They took out loans they couldn't quite pay back. They fought over money. They complained that business was slow. One of them basically wrote home saying, "Send more silver." They worried about deadlines, taxes, and shipments running late. There were marriage contracts and divorce papers, court cases over who owed what to whom, even wills sorting out who got the family's silver. Honestly, swap the donkeys for delivery trucks, and it could be an email chain from any office today. And here's the detail I love the most. The women ran the business back home. While the husband was off traveling for months at a time, his wife managed the money, chased down the debts, and kept the whole thing running. Some women in these records even ran their own trade, buying and selling under their own names. Which brings us to one specific letter, one of the sealed ones. It was written by a woman named Anna. She's writing to her husband, who's far away on the road. Somebody owes their family silver, and this guy will not pay up. He keeps stalling. He says he'll only settle the debt once the husband comes home. So Anna is basically telling her husband, you deal with this. And these women were not just helping out on the side. In the records, wives show up signing contracts and even writing their own wills, with rights that look surprisingly close to their husbands. For that time in history, that's genuinely remarkable. Think about that for a second. A wife, almost 4,000 years ago, chasing down a guy who won't pay what he owes. Some things really never change. Now, back to the big problem. How do you read a letter you're not allowed to open? You don't use a knife. You use X-rays. A team led by a French scholar named Cécile Michel, working with a physicist who builds X-ray machines, designed a scanner that looks straight through solid clay. It works a lot like a hospital scan, but instead of scanning a person, it scans an ancient tablet. The machine spins around the sealed letter, snapping hundreds of X-ray images from every angle you can imagine. Then, a computer stitches all of it together into a full 3D model, and here comes the magic. On the screen, they can peel the envelope away, layer by layer, without ever laying a finger on the real thing. The hidden writing rises up out of the clay, sign by sign. A letter no living person had ever read, suddenly readable, glowing on a screen. One of those hidden tablets turned out to be an old business contract, a deal between two merchants whose names we can finally read again. That very tablet is sitting in a museum today, its secret finally out in the open. And they didn't just do this once. In a single museum visit, they scanned dozens of sealed letters and contracts, pieces that had stayed shut and silent for thousands of years. And get this, one full scan takes less than 13 minutes. And the machine itself is a bit of a marvel. It weighs about as much as a small piano, but it comes apart into a handful of pieces, and a team can set it back up in a couple of hours. So, the fragile tablets never have to leave home. The machine travels to them. Okay, remember that twist I promised you at the start? Here it is. When the team scanned one of the sealed contracts, they spotted something that had no business being there. Tucked inside the clay, right next to the writing, was a single grain of barley, a real seed, 4,000 years old. It got sealed in by pure accident, the moment someone pressed that wet envelope shut. And it stayed hidden in the dark ever since, just sitting there, quietly, while empires rose and fell above it. A plant scientist could even tell it was barley just from its shape. The little grain still had its pointed tips, and the shallow groove running down its side, clear as the day it was sealed away. You could never have found it without breaking the tablet apart, and breaking it apart would have destroyed it forever. But the surprises didn't stop there. The scans showed that these envelopes were built in layers, almost like an onion, so the clay could dry without cracking. And in one case, the envelope was made of completely different clay than the letter inside, which hints that someone wrapped it up later, maybe in another town entirely. Now step back and think about what all of this means. For 4,000 years, these letters were mute. The words were right there, sealed in the dark, and nobody on earth could hear them. And now, one by one, they're getting their voice back. And nobody has to destroy them to hear it. That's the part that really gets me. For centuries, reading the past meant breaking the past. Now, for the first time, we can do both, read it and keep it whole. Out of everything, though, the thing that sticks with me is that one letter. A wife, thousands of years ago, just trying to collect a debt for her family. Not a king, not a war, just ordinary, everyday life. Reaching across 4,000 years to say, this happened, and I was here. And it makes you wonder. There's another sealed envelope sitting in a museum in London right now. Still shut, still unread. It's clay stamped with seals from 3 different cultures, pressed there 4,000 years ago. How many other sealed letters are still out there? How many stories are waiting inside things we've always been too afraid to open? If this one grabbed you, tell me down in the comments. If you could read one lost letter from history, whose would it be?